if you do go to film school, when you graduate, I thought, like, oh, I'll get a job on a set and work my way up to director or something. It doesn't work like that. You have to really kind of like, your path is very all over the place and you're kind of steering the ship. So yeah, just having faith and the endurance to stick it out, because the people that make it are the ones that, just keep pushing for their stories to be heard.
Our guest for this episode is Elle Callahan, a film director, writer and sound designer. Her latest movie, Witch Hunt, is set in a modern America where witches are real and witchcraft is illegal. A sheltered teenager, played by Gideon Adlon, must face her own demons and prejudices as she helps two young witches avoid law enforcement and cross the southern border to asylum in Mexico. Witch Hunt stars Lost's Elizabeth Mitchell and is out in theatres, on demand and digital from October 1st, 2021.
Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how your filmmaking journey started? So did you go to film school, for example?
Sure. So my name's Elle Callahan. I'm a writer-director. I just finished my second feature that's coming out soon, Witch Hunt. I did go to film school. I went to the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. I kind of always knew that, I guess starting in middle school when digital cameras started having a movie function, once I discovered that, I kind of realized that that's what I wanted to do. Because it was just so fun to tell stories visually, and having that be my career seemed like kind of like a life hack. So I just started making little movies with my friends all in middle school and high school, and then submitted to as many film schools as I could and chose one in Los Angeles because I knew that was the city that made the most sense to start putting roots down in. And I've been in LA for 10 years, worked very hard I was a production assistant for years out of school until I left to go make my own films. So I've kind of been, and I spent a lot of time in post-production. I've been on all different aspects and sides of the camera before finally settling and writing and directing, which I think is important. I think you should really have a well-rounded education and grasp of the filmmaking industry if you want to direct, because directing is basically just delegating and making sure that everything is working towards a cohesive vision. Like, it is your vision, but since filmmaking is so collaborative, it's never just yours. You're always going to be cooperating with many different kinds of artists.
Yeah. Do you think that going to film school for you was like a necessary transformative experience then, or do you think you would have got to kind of where you are now without going?
I don't think that film school is necessary, because I don't really think you can teach creativity. I think that you can learn and kind of hone your skills. But in today's world, you can learn, the basics and, rules of screenwriting online. You don't need to go to film school necessarily to learn all those rules. For me, it really helped because it allowed me to be a part of a community. And I'm still today working with people that I went to school with. It really helped me establish a network, and also allowed me to basically move to Los Angeles. I don't know if I would have had the gumption to do that on my own if I wasn't kind of coming into a setup kind of little world that allowed me to grow for 4 years. So I think for me, what I got out of it was the network and the community that I'm still surrounding myself with today.
They caught somebody from our town transporting witches across the border.
They're not refugees, they're criminals.
Yes. Criminals. We can't be risking our lives for them.
These women are born with their powers. They don't have a choice.
Why do you help people like us?
Can you tell us about your upcoming release, Witch Hunt?
Yeah, it's a kind of like a horror thriller about a modern day America that's pretty much the same, except magic is real and only women can express it. So they're seen as witches and they're persecuted for such. So my story revolves around a family that helps young witches escape persecution by the US government and try to seek asylum in Mexico. And it's really it's a story about acceptance and prejudice and obviously witchcraft. And it's one that's very close to my heart. I think it kind of echoes the world that we live in today, just through a magical lens.
Yeah, no, so definitely social commentary sort of going on there as I watched it. That became more and more apparent, I think. How long did it take you to write the script for this particular movie? And can you give us an idea of a typical day or maybe a session of writing? So what's kind of your approach?
Well, for this movie, this was the first script or film that I wrote on my own. My first movie, I just directed and, worked on the story with the writer, Michael Nader. But for this movie, it was my first solo script. So it was a hard journey, to be honest. Writing your first script takes a lot of confidence. You really you don't have anyone to fall back on. So I think it took me about maybe over a year to write it. And in that time, I think I totally started from scratch in terms of the story about 3 times, just threw it out. And that was the biggest takeaway that I've kind of learned, is to not be super precious with something. Just because you finished it doesn't mean that it's not the best choice to completely start over. I think a big part of being an artist is trying to grow and learn and not think that your work is the best stuff ever. I don't think you should be too self-deprecating, but I kind of, when I was going back to the drawing board, it was because I knew that there was a better story in there and I needed to find it. In order to do that, I just needed to start over. But I took a lot of things from those other drafts and incorporated them into the final one. But my process did involve starting over a lot. But now that I'm a little bit of a more seasoned writer on my own, I'm a binge writer. So there's, so many different types of ways that you can go about your day writing, but I will procrastinate. And then all of a sudden I'll get very overwhelmed and I'll sit down and I'll write for 9 hours and pump out 70 pages. And then I won't write for another 2 weeks. And then I'll kind of do the same thing. I find that if I do a more structured approach, like some of my friends do, where they do 10 pages a day, I'll either lose interest or I'll kind of forget what I've written. So I kind of go with the binge method. I don't know if it's the most emotionally healthy way to write, but that's what works best for me.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've done 9 hours before, but I've done 5 hours, and some of those sessions are my best work. So no, I'm with you on that. I was extremely impressed with all of the performances in Witch Hunt, if I'm honest, but Gideon Adlon's particularly stood out for me. How did she come on board the film? And was there a film that maybe you'd seen her before and that caught your eye? Or did she simply audition for the part? How did that come about?
I went after her, actually. I saw her in a movie, Blockers, which is this kind of big comedy that she played one of the leads, daughters in. And I don't know, it was this feeling. I saw her and I was that actress is so good and she's going to be so big. And when I was writing my film at the time, and I started to see her face when I was writing scenes. So when we went out to cast it, I sent the script to her agents and I was if she wants this part, I would love for her to be in it. And then we sat down and met over coffee to talk about the script and the potential project. And she was so keen on the story and the development of her own character and asked me questions that I hadn't even thought of in terms of her character's relationship to other characters, her journey. And I try to work with people that I think have a better grasp on their aspect of my film than I do. And I was all right, great. She's going to make this so much better than I could have ever imagined. And she did. I think she's an amazing actress, so classy, and she's just going to go so far.
She had such screen presence, and a really consistent performance, I thought.
And being like the protagonist of a film, having your face on screen for most of the film, basically carrying the emotional weight of the entire movie, is a big job. And it's something that as a director, you need to have a lot of trust in that actor. And there was just kind of like an immediate trust between us. So yeah, it just felt right.
The movie also stars the consistently excellent Elizabeth Mitchell, who will be a familiar face to fans of Lost in particular. I noticed that she served as executive producer on the movie. Could you describe the practicalities of her involvement as an exec on the movie for those, especially for those who don't really know what an executive producer kind of does, might be interested to learn?
Well, executive producers do kind of a wide range of things. Elizabeth brought so much experience to this project. Like, she's been in the business, since, I was a lot younger, and I grew up watching her on Lost. And so she, in this film, kind of brought that kind of clout and wisdom and to our set. And especially with smaller indie movies, having kind of a bigger actor come on board and throw their weight behind a project really does a lot for its success. I learned so much from her. We all kind of learned from each other, but she has just such a presence. And similar to Gideon, she kind of took her character and made it her own, this kind of like quiet confidence, this calmness that Martha didn't necessarily totally have in the script. Elizabeth really made it her own and balanced the movie so well.
I've read in other interviews that you're a fan of Guillermo del Toro's work, and the atmosphere that you create in the movie, for me, has definite parallels with the likes of Pan's Labyrinth. If you could sit down with him, like I am now with you, whether being Zoom or in person, what do you think you would ask him, and why? So what one thing would you, if you had the chance to ask him, what would you ask him?
Gosh. If I could ask him one question, I guess I'd probably ask him like what his favorite monster is. I'm a big fan of his monsters. He does so much work with practical effects, and that's what I try to do as well. His films are so colorful, and in genre films, our films can start to get a little washed out because that kind of blue, dreary color tone kind of signifies horror. But all of his films have so much vibrance and saturation and life. I guess I'd thank him for that, because he's keeping that alive. I pull from that a lot in terms of color palette, but I'd ask him like what his favorite monsters are.
Fair enough. And finally, what do you wish you'd known when you first started in the film industry? And kind of what one piece of practical advice would you give to aspiring filmmakers who are just starting out?
I think I kind of did know this a little bit, but not the full extent, how different of a career it is to any other choice you could make. Your path is going to be very different than your friends from high school or college who kind of have a more structured life. Like tomorrow I could go hopefully direct a huge movie and, buy a mansion in Spain or not, but, I've been doing indie movies, and the endurance that it takes, and you have to like kind of believe in yourself and hope that, your next movie will be the one that gives you a little more stability. But, I wouldn't trade it for the world, but I do think it's a career that you have to be your own advocate and champion for. There's no set route to go. You have to forge your own path, especially coming out of, if you do go to film school, when you graduate, I thought, I'll get a job on a set and work my way up to director or something. It doesn't work like that. You have to really kind of like your path is very all over the place, and you're kind of steering the ship. So yeah, just having faith and the endurance to stick it out, because the people that make it are the ones that, just keep pushing for their stories to be heard.
As you did go to film school, what one thing at film school that comes to the top of your mind did you feel you've learned and taken away from film school that if you hadn't gone, you wouldn't have known?
Well, at film school, I studied sound design, which I wouldn't have learned if I didn't go, because learning that, I learned like on a big mixing board, which I would have never been able to touch if I didn't, they're very expensive, multi-million-dollar pieces of equipment. And that honing that skill of sound editing and mixing allowed me to have like supplement my income with that kind of aspect of the film industry while I was first starting out, because being a writer director is not the most financially lucrative career when you're first trying to get your projects made. So having another technical skill is really important, so that you can support yourself. And if I hadn't gone to film school, I don't think I would have learned post-production sound. And I don't know if I would have been able to last as long as I did in Los Angeles until I finally was able to get my scripts out there.
Okay, no, brilliant. I'm glad I squeezed that last question, and that was an interesting answer. Yeah, thank you so much for your time, Elle. We really appreciate you joining us to chat to us today about your filmmaking journey and your film, and I wish you every success with that and your future as well. Stay in touch.
I will. Thank you.